Hi everyone, my name's Davey Wales. I'm from PPL, and welcome to Out of Focus on behalf of Focus Wales. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about PRS for music and PPL, and just understanding the different kind of copyrights that musicians, music creators need to understand as part of their career. It's not the most glamorous of topics, so apologies in advance if any of it gets a little bit dry. However, it is vitally important that you understand the different rights and make sure that you are collecting everything that's due to you. My esteemed colleague from PRS Music, John Hilmosh, will be along with us shortly. I think he's actually just logging in now. And John's going to talk you through some of the PRS for music intricacies, and then I'll talk a little bit about PPL and how we fit in with your careers. Might actually touch a little bit about the PRS Foundation, which is part of the grants charity sub that they have there, and then we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. So, John, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you unmute your mic? No, it doesn't look like it at the moment, in which case...
Hi,
oh,
can you hear me?
John.
How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you? There he is.
Yeah, how's it going?
Not too bad, thank you. So we should have some guests. Just basically, I've been treading water, John. Won't lie to you. Did you want to introduce yourself and?
Yeah, let me just give me a couple of seconds. I've had to set up an alternative thing because I had some issues with my computer.
Okay.
Hilariously.
No, just so you know, John, we are live. So to quote Davina, please don't swear or.
Of course not. Bear with me. I'm just going to start my presentation. I'll get it set up, and then we'll be ready to go. Right, I'll just get the slideshow. Right.
Just while
okay, guys. Right.
Yeah, just while John's setting up, there's a Q&A section as well. So there's a little section at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions about some of the stuff that we're talking about, then fire them away in there, and we'll try and answer them. I think we're gonna have Q&A at the end. But if you want to start, if there's anything that either of us say, and you want to get a bit more detail on it, then just let us know in the Q&A in the chat section. We'll pick that up as we go as well.
Yeah.
Okay, John, you ready?
Okay. Thanks very much, Davey. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Fy enw i John Hywel Morris. My name's John Hywel Morris. I look after the membership in Wales, and generally, I expect some of you will have come across me before. But we're going to take you through some of the basics and maybe a bit more up-to-date stuff on both the PRS and PPL sides. Obviously, the collection societies are of great importance for any musician, trawling their way through the music industry. I joined PRS myself in 1990, long before I worked for the company, and it was one of my significant sources of income when I was a professional musician. So without further ado, I'll set up my presentation now. So just bear with me a second. Right, I'll just set up the I'll just set up the share screen. You've got to tell me if this works. You seeing that?
Yeah, you're good to go, John.
Right, okay. I need to put a full screen on it. Give me a second. Right. Right then. So, PRS for Music, we're a royalty collection society. Our members are songwriters, composers, and music publishers. And our customers are people who use music. So we get our royalties from people who use music. We issue licenses to those customers, which effectively lets them use their music and also pay for it. These are then paid as royalties to the members. Now, this is all fairly basic stuff, but just in case you're, not aware of exactly the machinations of it, I'm just going to take you through very quickly this part of it. A copyright work can be a number of things. I think what we're dealing with here, we're dealing with a literary work. Well, if you write words get used in music as a copyright in that. Musical work could be anything from a sort of death metal to a symphony or a dance track, hip hop, grime, wherever. Sound recording is the actual sounds that you hear. So therefore, you're going to be dealing with, there's a copyright in the recording. Sorry, there's a copyright in the recording that basically is separate to the musical work. And I'll go into more detail with that in a minute. Very quickly, these are the rights as defined in the 1988 Copyright Act. The right to perform, to communicate, to adapt, to copy, to issue, and to rent and lend. Perform is obviously the PRS side. Communicate, broadcast is also the PRS side. Copy is the MCPS side. Adapt is something that we as collection societies don't deal with. That would be in the hand of the copyright holder to give, for instance, permission for an arrangement. Right. Basically, the benefits of being a copyright owner are fairly obvious. In other words, if you've written a piece of music, you need to monetize that. Well, you don't need to monetize it, but basically, it's your way as a musician to earn money from your music. I've already explained the licensing, getting permission to do so, and therefore having to pay monies. It's important to show the difference between what we collect and what PPL collects. So we collect on the composition, the music and the lyrics, and PPL collect on the sound recording. Davey will go into much further detail than that than me. So again, this slide just shows PRS for music is for songwriters, composers, publishers, PPL for performers on the recording, the sound recording master rights owner, i.e. a record company or a label. Of course, if you're in a band, very often you're the songwriter and the performer. So in my case, most of the songs I've written, I've also performed on. I have performed on songs that I haven't written, which means I just get PPL and not PRS. If I composed for another band, I would just get the PRS and not the PPL. The difference between PRS and MCPS, the general difference is if you can hear it, it's PRS. If you can hold it in your hand, it's MCPS. It's a little bit more convoluted than that in the online world, which I'll come to, but basically PRS is generally the performance of something you can hear, like a live gig, or a sound coming out of the radio, sound coming out of the computer, sound that you hear when you're in a shop or a pub. You know, there needs to be a PRS license in place for that. With MCPS, effectively, if somebody makes a copy of something, then there is MCPS on it. And also, in the online world, a stream also has an MCPS element because it has to be copied to go from one server to the other in order to get down to your computer or your phone where you can listen to the music. Here's an example, Valerie by the Zootons, which was covered by Mark Ronson and Amy Winehouse. So the Zootons are going to get the publishing, i.e. they're going to get the PRS for music. They're going to get the PRS for music royalties, which could be PRS or MCPS. But the PPL for the Amy Winehouse, Mark Ronson recording would not go to the Zootons. It would go to Amy Winehouse and Mark Ronson, whoever else performed on that recording, including session musicians. And here we got some, so coming to where PRS for music's big, licensees are. One of our biggest licensees is, of course, the BBC, with all their television, radio, and online work. Then we've got bars, we've got hairdressers, we've got live gigs, online. So we got, Spotify, CDs. In other words, if you press X number of CDs, you may need to pay an MCPS license on that if you're a record company. And if you're a writer of music that's used on a CD, you benefit from that. Our customers, crazy number, isn't it? 362,000, I think at the last count. These include a lot of sort of places where you'll hear the music in public. So 89,000 of them are shops, for instance. 29,000 are offices, almost 30,000. Hairdressers. There's 528 different TV companies that we license. Pubs, 38,000. So you get you get an idea of how broad the number of different places that we have to license. I mean, we license ice cream vans, we license the police, we license anybody who's using music in a public place. Our members, as I've already said, songwriters, composers, publishers, if you're producing dance music, successor members as well. In other words, I myself am a successor member of my mother, who wrote theme tunes for the BBC many years ago. So we have a number of different types of members. Basically, if you're writing music and it's earning a royalty, you should be a member of PRS. At present, we have 145,000 members. The gender split, this is something we were looking at last year and this year, is disappointingly low historically, but it's rising. I think when I started doing these seminars, it was around 15% of the overall membership. Now it's 18.4%, but it's not enough. But interestingly, 63% of new members under 30 years old were women. So we can see the shift coming. And long may that continue. For those of you listening who are not PRS members, I'm sure there might be some questions that may come up in the Q&A, but here's the basics. To join PRS, it's a one-off fee of £100. To join as a publisher is £400 for each for PRS and MCPS. If you want to join MCPS as well as a writer, it's another £100. But that's a one-off fee. I joined PRS in 1990, and it cost me £25, which is a lot of money for a jobbing musician earning their full keep from music. at that time, and I was a bit sort of, I think, resentful because my publisher forced me to join. My attitude totally changed when I got my first royalty check, which was around £280. And then it made me wonder why I didn't join PRS many years earlier. It's important to note, because this is a question I get fairly often, that if you're in a band and all 4 of you or 5 of you or whatever the number write, that you all need to join. You shouldn't have one person collecting on other people's behalf if you are all writers. Obviously, if there's one writer in the band and they've written everything, then that writer joins. But if all of you are co-writers, then you all need to join. I know £100 may seem like a lot of money to some people. I'm sure it would have done to me when I was in my early 20s. But that investment is a very, very good investment. It's better to join if you're making a career of some kind in music. It's better to join earlier rather than later. The number of people I've dealt with who joined years later and say, "Oh, can you get royalties by going back 7, 8 years?" No, we can't. Therefore, if your music is online, if it's being played on the radio, if you're doing a lot of live gigs, then the sooner the better. And those royalties will come in and will eventually, maybe very quickly dwarf the fee of what you've paid. The joining process is very straightforward. You just need to have your credit or debit card ready, an ID, which would be a copy of your birth certificate, passport, or driving license. And the online form, once you know what you're doing, if you've prepared properly, should not take you more than around 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. You then it'll be sent electronically to us, but we won't process it until you've printed it and actually signed the form. And obviously photocopy your ID as well. So at present, given the COVID issue, there has been some of the processes have been slow simply because we've all been working from home and we need to get to the office to see the actual printed copy, but we're catching up now. If you have one of those issues, if you have joined and still haven't received confirmation, definitely do mention this in the Q&A or maybe in the breakout session that I'll be doing afterwards. So when should you consider joining? Well, effectively, if you've got stuff online, if you've got stuff on Spotify or YouTube or wherever, and it's getting hits, then you should definitely join. If you're gigging, playing your own music, then you should definitely join. If you've been played on radio, if you've been played on, say, the Adam Walton Show or Beth and Elvin, or you've been played on any of the number of Radio Cymru shows, then you should definitely join. Don't wait, because if you wait a year, those royalties, we can't hold on to royalties for people who are not members. You need to join to be able to benefit. As I've mentioned a bit previously, but I'll go through them again. Sources of revenue comes from, gigs, clubs and small venues, concerts, yes. Radio play, TV as well. Films and ads, generally those can be, they'll come from PRS, but they'll also be sync licenses, some of which MCPS will do, some of which you may need to license yourself or via somebody else. Downloads and streams, well, streams and downloads these days, isn't it? Because there's a lot less downloads. Audio and audiovisual products, those are MCPS. International usage is everything else, everything internationally, all the above internationally. I don't want to go through all the kind of different percentages of what revenue comes in for each use, but I'll just give you, some examples quickly. If you do a gig in Clwb Ifor Bach, then depending on you know, the licensees deal with PRS, between 4 and 4.2% of all revenue from ticket sales will be paid to the songwriters or to the copyright owners. So if you're just a songwriter, it'll be paid to you. If you're a songwriter who's published, it'll be paid to the songwriter and the publisher. You need to provide set lists for these. But again, if, for instance, a concert, if you sell 100 tickets at £5, then 4% of 500 is going to be £20. That's on top of your fee, and it will come to you via PRS. Festivals such as Focus Wales are licensed, and we'll collect between 2.5 and 2.7% of all revenue on those. So the same rules apply. Let us know the set lists. We can then pay you the royalties, the PRS royalties for the use of your music in that festival. Going through some radio rates. These vary, by the way. Dependent on you know, which distribution. In other words, they go up and down a little bit. So you should always check. There's means of checking that on your PRS form. So at the moment, for instance, Radio Cymru is between 28p a minute and 44p a minute, depending on the time of day it gets played. Those are some examples of that. Similarly, I'll come back to the set lists here. For small gigs, you're looking at around £9 on average. You know, if you pay the local pub, then you'll probably get, if you submit a set list for it, you'll probably receive in the region of £9 for that gig. Now here's some TV rates. These vary. Obviously, BBC One network is a lot higher than BBC One for just Wales and S4C, but these are all per minute rates. I do get asked still how we split downloads and streams and how the split works between PRS and MCPS. The downloads, as you can imagine, because it's emphasizing the copy, is mostly MCPS. So it's 75% MCPS, 25% PRS. But the PRS element is the sound coming out of the computer. With streaming, you'd think, that equates more to a broadcast, more to a radio, let's say. But because of the element of copying to get to the server, there's still a significant MCPS element there. So streaming is divided equally between PRS and MCPS on the composer side, I hasten to add. And here's examples of who we license. So loads of licensees: YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, of course, Apple Music, Amazon, Facebook, etc. Here's an example of, it's approximate, and I think it depends on all various numbers of things, but this gives you an idea of how the revenue is split when you click play on, say, Spotify. Most of the money will go to the master rights holder, and those will come via digital distribution. Then around 30% go to the actual program, and between 10 and 15% to the publishing songwriter. Again, these are approximate figures, and it really depends on what kind of deal you have set up. Some master rights holders go for a lot more, some for a lot less, depending on who you're with and what kind of deal you negotiate. Just a brief word about MCPS. Generally, historically, I worked for MCPS from the very early days when I worked for this company. And MCPS was all then about licensing CDs with small element of broadcasting and other little schemes. including novelties and toys and things like that. But these days, obviously, with the decline of CDs, with the decline of CD sales, and you know, it's becoming less and less every year on that side of things. But there's a significant element of broadcast, which of course is the sync right, and TV, which MCPS licenses for the UK anyway. I'm sure you'll have some questions maybe about sync companies, etc. There are some elements which are not licensed directly, like US TV, films, adverts, where you can opt out of MCPS membership and decide to get somebody else to collect your money, or to indeed license it yourself. So for instance, if you're a commissioned TV music writer, then you're likely to opt out because you need to do a buyout to the TV production company already, or an MCPS buyout, not a PRS one. Right. How do you make £100? Well, that varies. But those figures speak for themselves, I think. It varies. The radio rates vary, the TV rates vary. Live gigs in a small club, yeah, 12 is probably. Album sales would depend on the dealer price, but again, it just gives you an idea of how you would generate or make back that £100. This year has certainly been more of a focus on the PRS Members Fund. Following the lockdown, PRS set up 2 emergency relief funds, one in April and one in June, which I did a lot of work on. It's there for members in trouble, for members who get ill, or members who have serious financial hardship. And if you are one of those people, then you should certainly check out the PRS Members Fund and check out the website. We can't always promise to give money, but we're there to help and we're there to listen. And I know that this is a very serious time for all musicians. It's a serious time for everybody, but it's especially for jobbing musicians who have been hit hard by this, and we are trying to help as much as we possibly can. But yeah, certainly check out the PRS Members Fund. I expect some of you have already been on the funding seminar that took place, I think, am I right in saying, earlier today? So I'm not going to talk too much about the PRS Foundation program, but just suffice to say is that there are a number of different schemes that you can apply for funding, and it's worth checking those out. There's a number of interesting funds that you can apply for. I think that Davey's going to speak a little bit more about the PPL Momentum Fund, which is one of the major funds for those bands or artists at the tipping edge. Right, here's some big figures. These figures sort of blow my mind sometimes as well, because if I'd been doing this seminar 20 years ago, the number of uses of music processed would have barely been 1 million, I think, probably less than that. Now we process 18.8 trillion items of music. Now, just to put that in perspective, if you click play on Spotify or on YouTube, that is one usage. So we're actually measuring every single usage and having to process it. That means we have to keep on top of our systems as it incrementally rises. You know, for instance, 18.8, that was a 65% rise on the figure previous year. So I expect that this year it'll be way above 20 trillion. It's crazy. We collected £810 million last year. Again, a lot of money. You know, we make up a significant portion of the music industry in the UK. We have on our database 28 million works, And as previously mentioned, we now have 145,000 songwriters, composers, and publishers, i.e. members of ours. Now I'm going to end this seminar because I'm aware of the time constraints and the fact that we started late because I had some Zoom issues. Just something to bear in mind, and this is not specifically a PRS slide, or these last two slides. It's just showing you how the music industry has changed. Now, I entered the music industry in some form or another in the very late 70s, you know, when I was gigging at the age of 14, 15. And the amount of change I've seen since, you know, both as somebody who listens to music and somebody who participates in music and as somebody who works in the music industry, has been incredible. You always think things are going to change, stay the same, but they change all the time. And of course, at the present moment, it's changing a lot. Now then, I'm not sure when this graph was done. I think it might have been 2014. This graph shows what they predicted was going to be the most usages of the music industry. And they predicted the downturn in downloads and basically the rise in all the other elements, which would be streaming. But interestingly, they've got it wrong because downloads have, well, it's not exactly a dangerous ski slope, but the drop in downloads is much greater than that. And, you know, the difference between the music industry in 2013 and 2020 is quite significant. And again, we don't always, you know, get these things right. But the next graph will show you more clearly over a number of years, up to 2008, how physical products have, the trends in physical products. So I'll go on to that now. Normally, I do quite a few questions about this, but because of time, I don't think I'll go through. I'll just sort of, so if you look from 1958 to effectively around 1982, that is the era of vinyl with 8-track, which is an old format, a very good format actually, a 1/4-inch tape, making some inroads, and cassettes then growing. The era of the cassette is the 80s. That coincided with people listening to music on the move, because really until the Sony Walkman, people, you know, if I wanted to listen to music, I'd be in my bedroom listening to it, or in the living room or wherever, or as it was in my school, the sixth form room. You know, we had an old record player there, and we just listened. That was our opportunity to listen. Yes, you could potentially listen in the car as well. But the Sony Walkman changed everything, and it showed the decline in vinyl and the rise of the cassette, which is an inferior format to vinyl. Vinyl costs have gone up with the price of oil as well. Now then, the CDs took over simply because it was so much better quality than cassettes. And then once CDs came down in price, the cassette was doomed, I think. Vinyl, most of the majors stopped doing vinyl, I think, in the very early 90s, and it coincided, I think, with one of the Gulf Wars when the price of oil went through the roof, and it just no longer became viable for them to print huge amounts of vinyl. So world events have affected the way we listen to music, events outside music. And, you know, the state of the economy. What you can also see there are the peaks and troughs of how many things which, you know, of how many products are being sold. So for instance, there's a big dip in the 80s, and that's in the US, but, you know, there are a number of reasons for that. It could be the rise in piracy, but it could also be, you know, some people will tell you, oh yeah, well, it was not very good music around then is one of the reasons I get given. I think the fact that people weren't sure what format to buy things in meant that they didn't do it. And I think as well, people started buying games. So for instance, it was in my day, you know, if you were going to be a little bit grown up, you started listening to music. You know, there weren't many other hobbies apart from sport. You know, it was sport and music. Then suddenly with gaming coming in, computers coming in, I think the landscape changed. But then the rise in CD sales, people buying things for the second time with the back catalogue, you can see it reached a peak in something like 2002, which was absolutely the golden age of what we'd call physical product. But of course, the seeds of its decline were already there with Napster and things. So that these days, you know, in the same way as some people used to look at me strangely when I said I had a huge vinyl collection, now people look at people strangely for having a huge CD collection. So what it shows is nothing actually stays the same for very long. And I think as a musician, especially somebody who's going into the industry, you need to be aware of the fact that people will listen to music in a different way. They will find music in a different way. And that's besides the type of music that's played. The whole way of consuming music and monetizing music changes. It may change very gradually, but it keeps changing. And it's just as well to keep abreast of that. Anyway, I've spoken long enough, so I'm going to say thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over now to Davey.
John, just before you go, you've actually got a question that's come through in the chat. It's a good one as well. It's in two parts, if you don't mind answering it really quickly. Someone's asked if you need permission before you can release a cover version of the song. That's the first part. And the second part is, what's the process to include samples from someone else's track in your composition? So if you don't mind just touching upon that, and then
if it's a straight cover, then that should be okay. How you define, you know, it's a cover as being exactly the same or as the original, you know, it's I suppose a gray area. If you're in any doubt that you've done something radical to it, then I would seek the permission of the copyright holder. But if it's a straight cover, you know, generally it's okay. I mean, some of the most popular songs, even Welsh language songs, you know, you'll come across sometimes 40 or 50 cover versions of some of the popular Welsh language songs. So you can imagine what it's like for some of the most popular English language songs or Anglo-American songs. So in terms of permission, if you've done something radically difficult to it, then you should definitely contact the publisher or the copyright holder. If you've done something a little bit different, if you change the words, for instance, yes, you need to ask permission. If it pretty much sounds exactly the same as the original as far as possible, then you're pretty much okay, I think. In answer to the second part, which is the samples, any samples. The sample has two copyrights. It has a copyright of the work and it has a copyright of the recording. He hasn't, or she hasn't specified what the sample is. Have they? No. Okay. I mean, but basically, again, you need the permission of the recording rights holder and the permission of the copyright holder of the musical work, i.e. the publisher or the writer of that. We know that in the real world, very often those kind of things don't happen. But again, I'm bound to say that if you don't want to end up in sort of in an awkward legal position, then it's always best to clear sample use. So that'll be my answer there. Any more questions, or is that it? Okay, I'll hand over to you then, Davey.
Thanks, John.
Okay, I'll just stop sharing now.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, let's see if we can do this. Switch
too much time, am
I? No, it's all right. It's all right. I say if we do run over a bit, then and everyone's happy to kind of crack on, then we will do. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about PPL. So my role at PPL is Performer Development Specialist. I've been there for over nine and a bit years. Essentially, I provide a bit of support and account management for high-profile emerging artists. So I do want to talk a little bit about PPL and what we do. It's quite a broad, holistic version. Talk about who we license. Obviously, John's touched upon the main differences between PPL and PRS Music. we'll look at I think the main things that we want to focus on today are going to be the people that we actually represent, the international side of what we do, and then actually managing the data, and then try and pull that all together for you. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end if anyone's got any specific questions. So back in 1934, and depending on which story you believe, there was a coffee shop in Bristol that had a string quartet playing, and the coffee shop was really busy. Loads of people would attend. It'd be the most well-attended place, so the proprietor would obviously do quite well out of having music in the premises. Decided that, why am I paying for this string quartet? I could get a record pressed up, and it's fulfilling the same role. It's still creating that atmosphere, that environment for my customers to come in and stay for the afternoon and drink as much tea and coffee as anyone can fathom as they did in the 30s. So essentially, that's not fair. It's not protecting the creators of the work. So PPL was established to kind of remunerate those creators, the people that own the recording, the people that play on the recording, and essentially to remunerate them for their work. So as you see on the slide, we license recorded music when it is played in public or broadcast on the radio or TV in the UK. We take all those license fees, and then we pay it through to the performers and the recording rights holders that we represent. When I say performers, it's the musician that's on the recording. So that ranges from featured artists, so like the named artist on the track, through to a non-featured session musicians. It's anyone that makes like an audible contribution to the track. When I say rights holder, it's the people that own the recording. So historically, that would always be a record label, but obviously times change. A lot more people maintain their own rights. So it's record labels, self-releasing artists, or sometimes even people that have been assigned an exclusive license for that particular recording. So we're licensing all the use of the recording music in the UK and then paying it out to our members. And then we've also got a network of international agreements with it's what we call a collective management organisation, or a CMO. Bear with me with the acronyms, there's going to be a few. So there's various CMOs in different territories around the world where these rights exist. And at PPL, we've got an international department, so we're able to actually go out to those different territories and collect your royalties, whether you're a performer or a recording rights holder, when your music is being used around the world. So again, just looking at the figures, so you can see the growth of collections over the last couple of years. We're not quite in the same remit as our friends at PRS for Music, but if you are interested in getting a slice of nearly 272 million pounds, then you do need to register. So you can see the growth from year to year. Obviously, next year's going to be interesting with all the licensing challenges that we've had. Can you call a pandemic a challenge? That's what I'm going to go with anyway. So last year is actually a £25 million increase on 2018. I think and that was across all of our core revenue streams, which we're going to look at in a slide or two, I believe. Next slide, as if by magic. So you've got that public performance and dubbing. So public performance is going to be that music in bars, shops, oil rigs, vets, or the other one that I think John mentioned a few as well. So it's anywhere outside of the domestic setting, so outside your home, your car, your a birthday party or a wedding. If there's recording music being used, then it should be licensed. So that's the public performance side. Broadcast is going to be your TV and your radio, and then you've got the international side as well. So historically, broadcast was always the biggest earner. What we've seen over the last couple of years is that public performance has taken over as like the main revenue stream. Next year, obviously, with so many premises that we'd license, so many premises being closed this year, we imagine that public performance collections are going to be reasonably lower. However, on the flip side, our international department are doing so well, we're actually hoping that's going to kind of balance out a little bit the collections across the year. So no pressure on the international side at the moment. With regards to paying the money out, we do 4 payments a year. So we have our main UK distribution. Our main UK money goes out in June, and we do a like an in-year distribution in December. And then we have 4 international payments go out across the year as well. So you've got March, June, September, and December, just at the end of each quarter. The way that the money gets split out is usually 50-50. So the recording rights holder, so that could be the label or the self-releasing artist, they'll take 50% of the revenue. The other 50% is kept aside for any of the musicians that appear on that recording. So that goes back to whether someone's a featured artist or a non-featured artist, like session musician, if you will. On the performer side, the featured artist takes about 65%, and then non-featured artists will take about 35%. If there's one artist on the track, so say I built the entire recording and I've done a vocal on it and I released the track myself, then I'd be collecting all of that revenue. So very similar to our friends at PRS Music, we are licensing TV broadcast channels, so over 250 across the UK, 410 radio stations and over 1,800 online radio services. So that's going to include hospital radio, college radio, and community radio. And again, just on that public performance side, so looking at around 400,000 businesses up and down the UK that are using recorded music in their premises. So you want to make sure that they're licensed correctly and that money is going back to the people that have created that music. I used to work in the public performance department before I moved into membership, and trying to explain to somebody why they needed, or trying to explain to a business owner why they needed to have 2 licenses was always a bit tricky. It's a bit like saying, if a pub's paid for their music license for PRS, but they haven't got a PPL license, then effectively you're saying, okay, well, you're paying John and Paul, but you're not paying George and Ringo. It's a bit of a crass analogy, but I hope you can see where I'm going with that. So in 2018, PRS Music and PPL actually formed PPL PRS Limited. I know that's a really catchy title. Essentially, it's to provide business owners with one music license, so it covers both sides of the copyright. The idea being that it would make it a lot simpler for the businesses up and down the UK to understand. There's less admin involved, and then because we're doing we're sharing information between the 2 organisations, so hopefully our collections and data will be a lot tighter. And then also to bring our costs down, because at the end of the day, as not-for-profit companies, we want to make sure that we've got low operating costs. Therefore, we've got more revenue we can pay out to our members. Because we can't say it enough, the difference between PPL and PRS and music. Whose idea to have 3-letter acronyms with P on red and orange backgrounds, I don't know, but it keeps me and John employed, obviously. So again, PPL, we've got the recording rights holder and the performer, and it's purely for recording music being broadcast. PRS, you've got the songwriting side, publishers, and that's covering the same things that we do at PPL, but you've also got the live side incorporated in that as well. So who can become a member of PPL? It's free to register, and it should be anyone that's performed on a recording, or anyone that owns the rights to the recording. So if you are a musician and you've played on commercially released music, then you should definitely think about registering with us as a performer. If you are a record label, or you want to set up a record label, or you're a self-releasing artist, then you need to be a recording rights holder. So if you imagine someone like Stormzy, who is the performer, he's the featured artist on the recording, so he's registered with PPL as a performer. Up until his deal with Warner, he was releasing music himself via his #Merky label, so he was also a recording rights holder member. And because he's writing his lyrics and his bars, he'll be registered with PRS and Music. So every time think it's really important to understand that if you are doing all three things, then you need to make sure that you're registered with the different societies to make sure that you're receiving everything that's due to you. So for every time Stormzy was getting played on the radio, he'd be getting paid as the featured artist on the track by PPL. He'd be getting paid as the recording rights holder by PPL because he owns the recording, and he'd also be getting paid by PRS for music because he's the lyricist, he's part of the composition. On the international side, sorry, I was keeping on time. I'm well aware.
Can I come in for a second there, Davey? We've had a question. The question is, interesting question. I have a rights holder and performer account. I have a rights holder and a performer account on PPL. I have received one payment from the rights holder account, but never anything from the performer. Even though the covers project I recorded for has had loads of more streams. Why would this be? Is it because it's covers? Well, I can answer that, no. But why would he receive recording rights holder payment, but not the performer? I think is the question.
So when the recording rights holder is registering the track into our database, they need to make sure that they're providing information about who's actually performed on the track. So it's mandatory that a recording rights holder tells us the name of at least one of the featured artists and at least one of the non-featured artists, if there were any. Problem with that is that sometimes, if depending on how you've entered the information, it might not have linked back to your performer account. What you should probably do is ensure that as a performer, you are logging in and you're making a claim against the recordings that you've played on. If you're both, if this is a recording that you've owned, then you can actually edit the recording and add yourself in.
Yeah.
If it's a recording that you don't own, so for example, say you played tambourine on a Dua Lipa track, then cha-ching first off, but well done. It's going to be released via so the label going to register that recording into the database. As the performer that's played the tambourine on that track, you need to make sure that you're logging in as a performer and making a claim against that recording, and then it's we'll backdate UK revenue as well, so you're covered.
Yes. I think it's important to state here, if I can come in, that the recording rights holder and performer revenue royalty, they're both ring fenced, aren't they? In other words, the recording rights holder can't collect on behalf of the performer and vice versa, unlike with PRS.
Absolutely. So the performer's right is their own. It's an individual right. So I'm just getting emails as well while I'm doing. Yeah, the performer's right is their own. So they need to make that money is essentially ring fenced. If they're eligible for that remuneration, chances are, if you are based in the UK or you've got UK citizenship or you're European citizenship, then you're going to be eligible for a full remit of royalties from us. There are a couple of territories around the world that don't actually pay performers, and their money gets reallocated to the label. But for the most part, you'll be covered. On that though, just to highlight, John, the recording needs to be registered into our database for it to be for it to fall as part of our control, so that broadcasters can license it. So if you've had a track that's been receiving airplay in 2020, you need to make sure that recording is registered in our database this year. You need to make sure that you're set up as a recording rights holder this year and you're registering that track into our database. Yeah. Once the recording's in our database, the performer's got 6 years. That's the statute of limitation. They've got 6 years to make a claim against that recording. So, for example, if you play Triangle on that Dua Lipa track, then but you don't make a claim against it, then you've got 6 years. Right. I wouldn't leave it that long because that's just UK. Obviously, obviously it's not obvious, but the rights internationally, they differ from territory to territory. They have different backdating periods. Most go back between 3 and 6 years. Some go as far as 15. Then you've got places like Germany and Japan, which have one rolling year. So I'd always recommend that you keep on top of your data, making sure that you're claiming against recordings as and when they're registered, making sure that you are linked to that track in the correct role. Yeah.
In fact, we've had a question just come in now on how far back do we go with royalties for PRS and PPL. So in a sense, you've partly answered that, haven't you? So
I think so. I hope so.
I mean, PRS go back 3 years. MCPS go back 6 years. I mean, the statute of limitation is 6 years. So, but it's important to note, if you join PRS this year, in other words, if you join tomorrow and ask us to collect something from 2017, 2018, we can't collect it because you weren't a member at that point. So we can only backdate. Usually, for instance, if you join now, we'll backdate to the 1st of July. If you joined in June, we would have backdated to January. And that's generally, we tend to do it in 6 months blocks. If you are existing a member and you haven't received some royalties for, say, a broadcast from 2017 or 2018, then yeah, it's usually 2 or 3 years. If you're trying to claim a gig, it's around a year. So it does vary depending on the usage. Sorry, I'll hand back to David.
I think in answer to that specific question, where someone's received money as the rights holder but not the performer, it sounds like you've obviously done the most part, and you've registered the recording into our database, so you're getting the label side. What I'd recommend that you do is just check the contributors on that recording and make sure that you're make sure that you as a performer are linked, you're listed on that recording correctly. Make sure it's in a payable role. So if you've linked yourself as a author or composer, that's not a payable role. What we'd need to see is that you've actually had an audible performance on the track. So a vocalist, guitars, drums, keys, synths, one of those. I hope that makes sense. Right, where are we? So we're just going to hammer through some international collections really quickly. As I mentioned earlier, if your music is played outside of the UK, we've got an international department. Headcount is around 18, 19 people. And we've got around agreements around the world. So there'll be, if you are mandating PPL to look after your rights on an international level, then those guys will be hammering out claims and managing your data across the world throughout the year. And as you saw on the earlier slides, that's by far the biggest growth area for PPL. And we're also signing new agreements every year as well. So you've got a little idea of where all the agreements are around the world. When we're signing a new agreement, we tend to do things on a value basis. So we'll look at where the most money is in the world. So when looking at Africa, the biggest market was South Africa. So that was the first agreement that we put in place. Nigeria has been signed since then as well. So from there, we'll be looking at, I believe Ghana is the next one. So we're always going to be looking at like a top-down basis to make sure that we're collecting as much money around the world as we can on behalf of the members that mandate us to do so. Yeah. I saw something on an earlier slide as well saying that we'd signed an agreement to make sure that we've got full coverage across every member of the EU. Which, if anyone remembers the EU, that was a fun time. And yeah, just to really reiterate about the growth in international collections. I mean, I remember when I started at PPL, on the membership side, international collections were something like 9 million. So the fact that it's almost 10 times bigger now. I'm not saying that's purely down to me, but probably is. And then by territory, you've got Germany, which is the biggest territory for our collections. That was actually because there was a change in policy in the way that GVL, which is the German equivalent, the German CMO. I told you there's going to be a lot of acronyms. Germany actually changed the way they did distributions, and that spike that put them at number one on this list is actually a lot of backdated money that we've been able to get from members as well. So yeah, you've got Germany, USA, which is in the US, they only actually license for these rights, the master rights or the neighboring rights, as it's often called. In the US, they only actually license interactive radio services like Pandora, Sirius XM, iHeartRadio. So although they're not licensing the use of recording music in public or on what I would call like traditional radio or using TV, it's still a huge market. So it's really important that you've submitted a tax form, a US tax form, to us as part of your registration as well. And if you've got any issues with that, then just drop the team a message and let us know. I suppose that the other interesting thing is that although you've got those major territories, the second one down on that list is others. So all those smaller territories where we think, oh, there's not going to be that much value there, when that's combined, that's actually bringing in over 17.5 million. And as I mentioned before, managing your data is really key. So when you become a member of PPL, either as a performer or as a recording rights holder, or both, or if you're the representative, if you're an artist manager and you want to have access, we can get you registered to make sure that you've got access to your online portal. And this is where you control all the data. So that'll be things like making claims against recordings that you've performed on, registering recordings that you own, and you can view all your statements and revenue analysis and all the great stuff that suddenly you find out that your music was being used in a school hall in York or something like that, which you never knew about. I think that pretty much just covered all that. So yeah, viewing your payments and statements, making sure that your bank details are up to date as well. Obviously, we can't pay you if we haven't got correct details for you, and just keeping on top of all the data. There's also some tools and resources on the website as well. There's some new how-to video guides. Luckily for you, they've not been voice-overed by a monotone lad from Essex. It's actually someone with a bit of melody to their voice, so they're a little bit more bearable than watching me do a seminar on a rainy Wednesday afternoon from South London. And then yeah, just to really quickly go over everything. If you have performed on commercially released music or you own commercially released music, make sure you are registered as a performer or recording rights holder, or both if you're self-releasing. If you're an artist manager, make sure that you're set up as a representative, and that you've got will get you access to all your performers' accounts as well, so you've got visibility over them. If you're accountant, if you've got an accountant or a lawyer and you want them to have access to your PPL account as well, then it's just a form to complete. Means that your accountants aren't bothering you asking to see your most recent statement. They can just log in and do it themselves. No one can change bank details other than the performer themselves. So just to make sure that if you're not sure about your manager logging in and changing your bank information over, they can't. It's always going to need to be directed by the performer themselves. Make sure you're registering with us for international collections. Obviously, that's a huge growth area. The neighbouring rights around the world is a maturing market, and the other CMOs around the world are getting increasingly good at managing their data and sharing it. So it's a huge growth area. So make sure that you are registering for international collections as well.
Can I come in here, Davey, again?
Yeah,
because we've had another question.
I think I'm actually at the end now anyway, John. Well, sorry, but just before I'm just going to leave that last page on there because it's got our email address. So if you have got any further queries, drop on member services, drop them a quick email, or if you've got an account already, you can actually raise a query online. Unfortunately, due to all COVID-related matters, and the actual staff in office at the moment is really limited. So phone lines aren't best option at the moment. If you do need someone to contact you directly, but if you prefer to speak to someone on the phone, then just drop a message and we'll arrange a time to get in touch with you. Sorry, John, did you want to say someone had a question?
There was a question for both of us. Any idea who, if anyone, collects royalties in India? You want me to go first?
I mean, it's for me, it's really quick. There isn't a right for performers in India at the moment. We've recently signed a new agreement with PPI, which is it's the rights holder side of these rights in India. So we can manage the label side, but there isn't a right for a performer to get paid directly at the moment for these rights.
Right. Okay. I mean,
like Australia as well. It's the same setup in Australia and New Zealand.
Okay, well, PRS in India, we can collect on some sources. I think in theory, we can collect on a lot, but we find that a lot of stuff doesn't come through. So I think it's better on online because it's easier to get the data, etc. I'm aware that broadcasts in India, you know, we had issues with getting broadcast monies from India before. So there's no straight answer to that question, I'm afraid. But again, happy to go into detail or to put you in touch with somebody who could tell you a little bit more than I could if you have a specific query concerning India, I think. Right. Have you finished, Davey? You're muted. Hello? Are you happy that you've done everything, Davey? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was having a tech moment there.
Yeah.
There was actually, sorry, someone's come through asking how long does it take for royalties to come through. They said that the track's been registered for over a year. As I say, we have for UK revenues, we do distributions in June, and then we do what we call an adjustment and in year in December. So the adjustment is if a performer has been added to a recording, and we need to move some monies around. That includes that backdating 6-year period. So December will be the next time we do an adjustment. And we also do an in-year as well. So if you had a recording that was broadcast on key broadcasters such as BBC, Sky, Channel 4, ITV, Capital, in the first 2 quarters of this year, then we'll try and pay you in December. If you know that you've had airplay and the recording has been registered, and it was so if you had airplay in 2019, then you should have had that money in June just gone. So if you haven't, please get in touch with your member services team. Let's look into it. There might be something that's not done. It may be that your performer account isn't linked up to the recording, or it may be that airplay hasn't been reported fully. So drop us a line. Let us look into that. We've got we've got a team of member services people. They'll deal with your query, but then wider than that, we've got departments that do all the repertoire, the reporting of music as well. So there's a lot of resource that goes into looking after these rights for you. So please drop them a line. We'll look into it.
Okay, I mean, to answer briefly the PRS side of it, I mean, again, it depends on the royalty source. But as an example, if you get played on Radio Wales, if you get played on Adam Walton Tonight, it's the July to September quarter, so that would be distributed in December. So that'll be a fairly quick turnaround. If you got paid in October, that would be the October-December quarter, then you'd be paid in April. So it tends to follow, you know, we do it, so January to March would be paid in July, April to June would be paid in October, July to September, December, October to December would be paid in April. So we have 4 major quarterly payments, and that's the PRS side. MCPS works in different ways. MCPS, the big record labels, account quarterly. To give a specific example on, say, S4C, Independent Production Company Blankets, which I know is a major source of income for Welsh language members, then there's no set rule. It depends on, it can get out very quickly. We could, in theory, pay within a couple of months of the broadcast. But it really depends on when the IPC, the Independent Production Company, send us the data and how quickly we can process it, license it, them to pay the invoice, and then for us to get the money out of the door. International, it varies. It really depends on the territory. I wouldn't want to go into very specific things, but as a general rule, you know, you can usually get some monies certainly in a year later. Any other questions? Are we okay? Oh, okay, just looking, we'll give a link to a follow-on meeting link. Okay, I think it's time to wind up the meeting because we've overrun a little bit. I'm going to be doing a breakout session, so if anybody wants to sign up to the breakout session, what do they need to do? I'm just going to ask. They'll send a link on the follow on to the meeting link in the chat now. So if you want to speak to me, look out for the link in the chat. Otherwise, I hope you've got some information from it. I think we've been through a lot of the basics. I'm sure we've missed out a lot of different things. I know I've missed out a few things, but simply, you know, if you have a query that hasn't come up, then certainly ask me. I don't promise to be able to answer some of the PPL stuff, but I could maybe give you a pointer. And of course, Davey has supplied all the details about who to contact, phone numbers, emails, etc. So you should be able to arrange to have at least some speak to somebody who will be able to tell you. So,
sure.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, John, if anyone wants to contact Focus Wales, and we can arrange for like further one-to-ones if that's something that anyone would be interested in. But yeah, I just want to say thanks for having these. I wish I could have seen you face to face, John. It would have been nice to have like caught up properly.
Yeah. Well, hopefully soon we'll do. Hopefully we'll do all that.
Yeah.
So
but thanks for having us, and thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, David. It's been great. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. And if you want to speak to me afterwards, just follow the link in the chat. Diolch. Goodbye now.